There is a very big national story that has broken. Huge. And it is this. In Baringo County, Gideon Moi, Man Gidi, as some people call him, has been cleared to vie for the upcoming by-elections on a KANU ticket, of course, because he's the chairman. And he will face a UDA candidate, oh yes, and an independent candidate. Trust me, all eyes will be on this by-election. But why? Because of the long history of rivalry between the Mois, very bitter, vengeful rivalry between the Mois and William Samoei Ruto. And because if the election is free and fair, and that's a big if the election is free and fair, it will conclusively tell us what kind of support Ruto still has in his native Rift Valley. Because analysts have been talking, people on the ground have been talking. Now is the time to find out once and for all what kind of support Ruto has left in his own backyard. Because the word on the street is very little. Very, very little. And so now we all understand why this is a national story. Not just about Baringo, but it is also a very deep story. Very deep. Welcome to my show today, where as usual we will go deep so that we understand better what is really at stake here. Because what is at stake here hey, is major. And if you do me the honor of staying with me until the end of this video, I am going to release a bombshell. Yeah, I am going to point to relatives in high places that have caused chaos. Yeah, if you caught my last video, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. Karibuni sana, twende kazi. Some quick background. This senatorial seat became vacant after the passing on of Senator William Cheptumo after a long illness. This happened in February this year. The late Senator Cheptumo, of course, defeated Gideon Moi in the 2022 elections, which was one of the shock results from the Rift Valley, where UDA swept. In fact, Gideon Moi's KANU in the whole of Baringo only got one parliamentary seat. And that is the controversial member of parliament for Tiati, Bwana William Kamket. That is the only KANU seat in the whole of Baringo. Bedroom ya Gideon Moi, bedroom ya KANU. That is the only seat KANU got. But now, things have changed. Since 2022, we all know in Kenya, things have changed a lot. But let us dive into the all-important background here. This beef between the Mois and Ruto, it came from where? Okay, let's start this story at the very beginning. William Ruto was a student at the University of Nairobi and was a member of the Christian Union on campus that used to visit State House frequently. And oh, this man's ability to smell opportunities, hey, watch it. And so one day got an opportunity to speak to Moi, President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi. And Moi called his trusted son Gideon and said something to the effect, tafutia huyu kijana kitu ya kufanya. And Ruto started out doing odd jobs here and there for Gideon. By then, Gideon Moi was a very different character. He was a very cocky, arrogant son of the President of the Republic of Kenya. I was told by somebody that Gideon would wake up one morning and decide that he's going to have lunch in Cape Town or Johannesburg. And by the way, those places are not within Kenya. And he would be on the flight and he would have lunch in those places. Just lunch. I'm telling you, this story is very fascinating and in my opinion very instructive. And then a man called Cyrus Njirongo, who was a wheeler dealer very close to the powers that be, finally gave Ruto a more defined job as his driver. I believe that Njirongo thought that Ruto was a distant relative of the Mois, and therefore having him as his driver would help his cause. Now you can see a photograph on your screens right now of when Ruto was driver. This is story ya Jaba. It happened. And then a man called Jacob Juma, who was a close associate at that time of Cyrus Njirongo, and another man called Jimmy Wanjige, whom we all know. This man, Jacob Juma, felt pity for Ruto, because Bwana Juma had also come from very humble beginnings, and he took Ruto under his wing and taught him the ropes. Biashara inafanyangwa hivi, kunaendanga hivi, this is how you get tenders, etc., etc. But let us stay on point. Very suddenly, Bwana Gideon Moi found that he was brushing shoulders with the guy who was his errand boy just the other day, Ruto. Aye? And remember, at that time, Gideon was a very arrogant man. I believe that is what triggered everything. That is where the enmity, the venom, took off. And I believe that Ruto made it his life's mission to show the Moi family what he was made of. And he started by snatching away the Eldoret North parliamentary seat from one of Moi's closest friends, Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi's closest friends. Okay? By the way, Ruto has never ever lost an election against the Mois. And so if he loses this Baringo senatorial seat to Gideon, it will be a first. And also remember that Gideon has not made the decision to vie unless he has a plan. What? And so, my friends, this should be more than interesting. Don't you agree? And so Mangidi suddenly found out that he's brushing shoulders, meeting this guy who was his errand boy even more frequently. And I'm sure hasira ikapanda. I believe you can picture the situation here. Yeah, put yourself in Gideon's shoes and also put yourself in Ruto's shoes. Yeah, as an errand boy, of course, Ruto was going to Gideon. Boss, sina fare leo. Ai? Lakini nilikupatia 500 asubuhi, umepeleka wapi? And then maybe Gideon removes that kanjirongo. That is what we used to call the 500 bob note after Cyrus Njirongo. He removes the Njirongo and throws it at Ruto. You can imagine that situation. And you can imagine what Ruto was feeling. Okay? That is how it started. And then now, this man is an MP, Mheshimiwa. This man is attending functions where Gideon is also there. And then maybe somebody says, hey, isn't that your MP from the Rift Valley? You can imagine. I'm just trying to paint the picture for you. But even all that is not enough to explain what has happened between the two over the years. It is not enough because the venom is too much. The venom could not have been caused only by that. There must have been something else. Sample the following. President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, before he passed on, forgave everybody. In fact, Moi was a very forgiving person. I can't remember anybody Moi did not forgive. But he never forgave Ruto. Why? What was it? Oh, I have remembered, actually, there is one other man Moi never forgave. Yeah? And that one was with good reason. Although the good book tells us we must forgive. Whatever somebody does to us, forgiving is not an option. You must forgive. Now, the man I'm talking about is a man called James Erastus. Yeah, please allow me this aside. I assure you, it is more than super fascinating. Now, Bwana Mungai was a provincial police boss in charge of the Rift Valley. A very arrogant man who used to ride a horse on the streets of Nakuru with a whip to whip people who did not get out of the way on time. Now, incidentally, Bwana Mungai, a cop, attended an overseas training with my late political lecturer. And I remember my lecturer always used to tell me he doesn't understand what happened to Mungai. Because these stories which were coming from the Rift Valley were not the Mungai he knew. He was just a normal guy. But then I guess that is another lesson of how power goes into people's heads. Because my political lecturer confirmed to me Mungai was actually related fairly closely to President Jomo Kenyatta. I believe that explains a lot. And there was this incident in 1975, which was even included in Moi's biography, penned by the Briton Andrew Morton, just to show you how Moi never forgot this incident. Hey, it was very embarrassing. Moi had come back from a foreign trip, I believe from Addis Ababa. There was an OAU, Organization of African Unity in those days, meeting, and Moi had jetted back into the country, only for Mungai to confront him and claim that Moi had come back into the country with guns to overthrow Jomo Kenyatta. He just wanted to harass and bully the guy. But I believe he went too far. In Andrew Morton's book, it is written very clearly that Bwana Mungai conducted a strip search of the then vice president. Hey, do you know what a strip search is? Maybe some of us don't know. A strip search is the search conducted on prisoners. Do you know how prisoners are searched? Do you know after they have stripped naked, where else they can hide something? Do you know? That is the search which was conducted on Moi in 1975. Confirmed in his own biography written by Andrew Morton. Kwa hivyo hiyo story si ajaba. It is not a rumor, as some people have been saying over the years. It happened. You can imagine the embarrassment Moi went through. And indeed, Moi complained about the incident to Jomo Kenyatta when he had come out of one of his long comas. And you know how Kenyatta responded? I believe that incident is fairly famous. Kenyatta asked Moi a question. Whose docket in the cabinet is in charge of the police? Moi responded, Home Affairs. And who is in charge of Home Affairs? Moi had to keep quiet. It was him. End of story. So Moi suffered a lot. And so it is not surprising that in August 1978, when Jomo Kenyatta suddenly passed on, and shortly after they announced his death, we were told that Moi was due to be sworn in as president. It is not surprising that as all that was unfolding, the provincial police boss in charge of the Rift Valley, Bwana James Erastus Mungai, was in a vehicle speeding at high speed towards the Ethiopian border. The man fled the country, and for years he wrote apology letters to Moi from abroad, apologizing for how he treated him. I believe this is a lesson for all of us, even those arrogant UDA people. Vindu vichenjanga. For the curious, the way that story ended is that Mungai finally flew back into the country, and the moment he landed, he was arrested, and he was jailed, I believe, for a year, and then released. He's still alive today. There is one day I saw him somewhere in Mombasa, in Nyali, backing orders to his servants. Yeah, he's still arrogant. But on second thoughts, in a way, Moi also forgave Mungai, because Mugabe was later released and he went back to life as an ordinary Kenyan. Nothing bad happened to him. And so back on point, it is only Ruto Moi never forgave. Why? I have been trying to dig into the real reason for years. I've even heard of the story about how during the clashes in 2007-2008, shamba ya Moi ilichomwa, and some people linked the incident to handlers or people who were close to Ruto. I've heard that story. But still, that is not enough. But still, to me, according to me, that does not explain the venom. Hiyo venom ni nyingi na ni kali sana. And so the question about this upcoming by-election is a very simple one. Will the anti-government sentiments in the Rift Valley win the day? Or will the people of Baringo decide not to embarrass President Ruto? Which of those two do you want to place your bets on? If you asked me, I'm not a betting man, but if you asked me and you insisted, I can only say the following. That particular by-election will be quite chaotic. There will be a lot of things which will happen because this will be a real battle royale. A very gigantic, major political war. That is what is going to happen in Baringo. Now, as promised, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies even closer. The man most responsible for the passing on of J.M. Kariuki was a very close friend, somebody they grew up with together, somebody they were very tight with. And the name of that person was, of course, Ben Geddy, who at the time was in charge of the GSU, General Service Unit. That is the man who betrayed J.M. Kariuki and was involved in his passing on. And again, this is not story ajaba, because on his deathbed, Ben Geddy begged his children to go and visit the J.M. Kariuki family and to apologize. What was he apologizing for? Okay? The man who led Dr. John Robert Ouko, Foreign Affairs Minister at the time, to his death, was one of his closest friends, a man called Hezekiah Oyugi, who was then the PS internal. The late Ouko went with him because he trusted him. And that was the end of Ouko. Keep your friends close, but keep your enemies even closer. The man who pulled the trigger and released those 2 resources that ended the life of Tom Mboya was actually very close to Tom Mboya. In fact, Mboya had organized his training abroad in small firearms, like the small firearm which ended Mboya's young life. Okay? And the name of that man was Ben Geddy. The very same man from the JM story. This guy was mtu wa mkono for dirty jobs in the Kenyatta regime. In fact, if you take in my classic documentary, Mboya, it was more than an assassination. I'll put a link in the description area of this video so that you can get this sensitive information completely for free. Okay? If you go through that documentary, you will discover that Mboya's last words, heard by eyewitnesses, proves beyond any doubt that he personally knew the person who pulled that trigger. Okay? Now regulars of this channel will begin to understand why my political lecturer insisted so much on William Shakespeare's classical political play, Julius Caesar. It was one of the textbooks. And in that play, the man most responsible for the passing on of Julius Caesar was his closest and his best friend, thus confirming human nature. And I believe that is why my very latest, highly sensitive special report on strange political bedfellows, secret meetings, secret discussions happening behind the scenes, in the backrooms, very filthy, dirty backrooms of Kenyan politics at the moment, will not only surprise you, but will give you a hint of what could happen in the future. Oh yes, and I'm talking about the very near future, because it exposes the little known relationships between key figures who are now talking across the political divide, and they're not even supposed to be talking. And you start wondering, what on earth could these people be discussing? That has to be the question. Now you can see details on your screens right now. For only Kenya shillings 3,999, you can get this red hot special report. Of course, a much cheaper option is to get the Kumekucha golden key, which gives you access to all Kumekucha information, all sensitive Kumekucha information, and even non-political information. Okay? Again, you can see the details on your screens right now. For only Kenya shillings 6,444, you will not only be able to get this very latest red hot special report, you'll also have access to all our past highly sensitive special reports, and even future ones, and even weekly intelligence briefings. And so if you're in a position to, please act quickly. Use the details you see on your screens right now and obtain this golden key, and you never need to worry again about paying for any information or any special report on this channel. And of course, I look forward to the ideal situation where this membership will be closed. That is, will not be accepting any more new members, because naturally that is the safest arrangement. Nimekuwa nikijaribu kujipanga na bado najipanga, and so it is a good idea if you're able to get that golden key, because you never know how close in the future I'll be in that position where I can close this membership and the membership stays stagnant. That will be safest for me, and also safest for my informants. Friends, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies even closer, especially because of the relationship between your enemies and those close to you, past, present, and future. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.